Okay, good morning everyone. Thank you for joining us this morning. My name is Steve Sapseed. I'm the Software Applications Director of BME Solutions, and I'm sitting here with Mike Frost, who's the Director of Finance at Anglia Ruskin University. You can all hear me, so that sounds good. And just to take you in terms of what we're going to cover today, the webinar is divided into 3 parts. I'll be showing a few slides to introduce the topic of student engagement, and then we'll be handing over to Mike Frost, the Director of Finance at Anglia Ruskin, who will be demonstrating the university's student engagement dashboard. There will then be an opportunity for the audience to ask questions of Mike at the end. In order to do this, please just use the chat on the right-hand side panel of your GoToMeeting panel, and we'll get through as many questions as we can. We've got time for. So my job is basically just to introduce the topic. So the engagement dashboard, what does it do? It provides an early identification of students who require support either academically or personally. It allows the student to initiate timely and appropriate interventions to help students stay on track. That may be via personal tutor or student services. It also provides an insight as to why of engagement may vary. Then we need to work out how we identify at-risk students, and that's done via rules of a threshold-based engine. It indicates how engaged students are. That is then displayed in an interactive dashboard to show personal tutors or student services or anybody at the university which students have a lower engagement score. And the dashboard, very importantly, displays results either at an individual student level or at an aggregated level. So the information could be seen by course, by faculty, by age band, etc. In terms of what was involved in setting this up, the data at most universities is already there in terms of the data, things like library logins or VLE logins. Anglia Ruskin University used Qlikview software to load data and develop the dashboard, and the only inputs it required some thought were the weighting parameters. So for example, how much does lecture attendance count versus a library visit or a VLE login. So in terms of actually setting it up very briefly, we've got some core data. So your student record system, the timetabling system, that information is loaded into Qlikview. You've then got engagement data. This doesn't happen to be Anglia Ruskin's engagement data. It's just a sort of a standard demo. So in this case, you've got library visits, VLE login, lecture attendance. You've then got some engagement rules that need to be put in. So what is a successful overall engagement level? Is it 75%? Is it 50%? At what level is a student at risk of a low engagement score? How many times do we expect the student to log into the VLE every week to get a successful score? How many library visits is deemed to be low? Then we have weighting factors, where we work out in what ratio are these engagement factors measured in. Is lecture attendance score higher than, for example, the library attendance? So we need to weight the information. This data is loaded into a Qlikview dashboard, and either via viewing the dashboard or via automated alerts, personal tutors and student services are then alerted to students that need to be looked at further. The reason why Qlikview is the ideal piece of software to perform this student engagement is that it is also a comprehensive ETL tool or database tool. So you can load and transform data from multiple systems and different sources and display it in one single dashboard. So in the case of Anglia Ruskin, there may be 5 or 6 different data sources that it's coming from, into one dashboard. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hand over to Mike Frost, the Director of Finance at Anglia Ruskin University, to show, to demonstrate the Anglia Ruskin dashboard. I'm just going to switch the screen over.
Hello, this is Mike Frost, Director of Finance at Anglia Ruskin. Today I'm just going to run through the current Anglia Ruskin solution for student engagement dashboards. In order to set this up, we created a working group which included our student union to ensure that there was a student voice in the development of the tool. As Steve has said, we already held lots of data, so we already had an attendance monitoring system. We were recording our VLE logins and recording activity in our library databases. We've also supplemented this with some assessment details, so you can see in this part of the screen here, it details how much assessment has been undertaken by individual students. Once again, we already had that data. So our first discussion was around the choice of software. Clearly, because we already had Qlikview and we knew its capabilities, we decided to develop in that product. The group discussed a range of features, one of which was for end users how simple the model would be to use. So for this reason, you'll notice that there is only one tab on this model called Dashboard. This was trying to make it as simple as possible for end users to be able to use. Steve talked about the algorithm to look at the engagement of students. For us, we've taken attendance at 60%, we've taken VLE access at 20%, and library usage. This isn't just going into the library, this is interacting with the library at 20% to give us an overall weighting score. Now clearly you can see all of this data is fully scrambled, so these are not details of the current population. If we then talk about other things that we built into the model, we looked at various bits of information in terms of how we measure it, how we look at it over different weeks, and you can see that in this example here, we've got semester 1 and we've got the individual weeks that are in it. We are able to change that into different formats. We've got a cycle screen where we can look at trimesters, individual weeks, or back to semesters. We then wanted some detail of individuals, so what we've done here is we just produced a simple table so we can see the individual population and have a look at what their scores are. We've got an overall search element here where we can search for any keyword that exists in the database. Once we start drilling through the model, it will start populating criteria. This is the clear all button. This tells us what the current selections are. One of the things we wanted to build into it was help, so we've got contact numbers that people can call up when they're looking at the model. And we also looked at the whether or not we should use email as a result of it. Now the whole purpose of this model is about student support. This is about making sure that our students realise their potential and that we help students who are starting to struggle, either academically or personally, so that we can discuss this with them and hopefully help them on their journey to receiving a good degree. You'll see in there that it says that to mail shot students you make sure that there's less than 250 are selected. It won't permit an email if there's greater than 250. Because in the main, we're expecting this tool to be used by personal tutors, and if there's any intervention from student services, that we contact them by telephone rather than send them emails. We can search by individual students. We've got a list of personal tutors. Pulling down the list gives us all the personal tutors. We've got selectors in terms of faculty, department, course, locations and modules. And we can also split in terms of gender, level, mode of attendance, ethnicity, study year, domicile, group and year. And we've also got an analysis of the completed credits and whether people have passed or failed individual modules. So if I start off looking at the detail, you can see this has got a population of 22,745 students. If I want to look at a particular tutor group, I can pick a tutor group and it will immediately filter that in terms of those who are on that particular course. For those who are familiar with Qlikview, green has been selected. If I click on it again, it will disappear. So I can start to look at, drill down on the individual details of the students and have a look at how the characteristics of a particular tutor group might change and how well engaged those students are. So I can create some kind of comparison at how an individual is performing against the rest of that group. One of the other things we wanted to do was to create more detail about individual students. So when a personal tutor meets the student, they can get additional information about that student where they can interact with them and indeed even share the screen with the individual student. In terms of weightings, we talked about weightings. You can see ours is 60, 20 and 20 for the attendance yearly and library. There is an option where we have chosen different mixes for different courses. We chose to keep ours very simple. We have just one algorithm for taught students and one algorithm for distance learning students where obviously there isn't an attendance score. If I click on an individual student, what you'll see is the additional tab will appear up this top corner. So if I click on this particular student here, then you'll see that there's a new dial here. It's immediately filtered this first screen, told us that this student has 100% attendance, 88.9% for the VLE and 25.4% for library access. And if I click on the individual student, then I get a whole load of more personalised information. So I get the individual student themselves, I get the course they're studying, I get the mobile or home phone numbers, which means that I can call them directly from this screen. We've got the email addresses. It gives me there the same profile as I saw on the top screen. It also shows me how they're performing in terms of their credit progression. The blue line here shows the individual student, and the black line is showing me what the average for all students on that course is. So in this instance, you can see that the student is performing above the average for that course. We're also collecting other bits of information about the students. So we have whether they're registered, whether they hold a Tier 4 visa, whether they've declared a disability, and we have a Books Plus scheme, and we can have a look on that one. This is to do with our access agreement. We can tell if the student's eligible, whether they've collected their card, and indeed whether they're using their card. Looking in a bit more detail, I can also go on to the assessments, and I can have a look at the individual assessments for that student. So that's just a click to show and a click to turn it back off again. But I can have a look at a more detailed analysis of that student. Now, as I said, this screen, and what I should also mention is that this student photo appears on our version because this is a scrambled version. Obviously, there's no photo to show. So this is very much designed with a view of sitting down with the student and discussing their progress and having a look at the characteristics and whether there's any additional intervention we could put in place in terms of some what we would call study skills training, or whether we have any concerns about attendance or the way that they're interacting with the course. By going back to my dashboard and clicking on the student, that information disappears again. We looked at traffic light systems. They were not very popular. The feeling we've tried to make this model very positive in terms of student experience, and therefore it was felt that showing red, amber and green were negative connotations, particularly considering that it may be that we're interacting largely with the students who were in red, and therefore we've adopted what is our corporate colour scheme, so that those three colours are in our crest in our materials. The other thing that we did on all of them is we used black text. Originally there were different colours of text, but once again, when we're looking at accessibility and different students may have sight impairment, black is a much clearer colour to use, so we tried to be relatively basic in terms of our colours. We're also developing a comment box where people will be able to log their interactions with students. Once again, this has raised some debates about exactly what is keyed into that, because of course once it's in the system, other people will be able to see it, and therefore there would have to be some kind of code of practice on exactly what could or could not be put into it. We're also looking at creating a more permanent student view, so students will be able to log in and see their own scores anytime they choose. The project overall started in July 2015. As is common here at Anglia, we wanted it to be quite a rapid development. So we had a pilot that we were able to put out in September. We currently got it out with 26 different pilot locations around Anglia Ruskin, and gradually over time the dashboard itself has been refined by the group to make sure that it is actually what our end users would like to see. Other things, I mentioned at the beginning that we wanted to make it clean. We only wanted one tab, and therefore one of the concerns was if we wanted to do some more detailed background work and have a look at some more statistics, build ad hoc reports, which initially we're not expecting our personal tutors to be able to do. So, if you like, for the more power users to get a bit more insight into it. The discussion was around, should we have one model or two models, one where it's for the personal tutors and another one for the more power user team. What we've done is we've got a section down the bottom which says show detailed analysis, and if I click on show detailed analysis, a range of other tabs appear. All of these are offering us alternative ways of looking at the data. They're not fully developed. This is not what the team have been concentrating on. They've been concentrating on the initial dashboard itself and the student view to date, albeit that this will gradually be developed in terms of the back-end users without impacting on a personal tutor's ability to use the product. Various screens. This one is a report that we can build, so I can take my details of my students and I can, by age band, I can add on the gender, the mode of attendance, and it will create me a report on the various criteria, and I can export it to Excel by using that button. Once again, clear all selections, clears all of that. My hearing. We also, as I said, operate a Books Plus system. We can tell what individual students are spending on in terms of different materials, different things they buy through our scheme. And I also have a tab about looking at our UKVI students in isolation. Once again, click on that, all those tabs disappear, and I'm back to the base screen. So we've had quite a lot of development on this product. It's been very well received by personal tutors, by academics. The feedback from students is positive. It's been, deemed to be motivational for students because while we were holding all of this data already, starting to put these data sources together means that we can assist our students better. And the whole driver for this model is about supporting students. It's not about, we don't use words like monitoring or tracking. Language is extremely important when you come to these kind of models. Often there is resistance internally. There's concerns about, if you like, the big brother scenario where people are looking at information. But as I said, it's all about positively engaging with our students and helping them achieve their outcomes.
Thank you very much, Mike. That was a very, very informative presentation of the Anglia Ruskin Student Engagement Dashboard, and I think it's absolutely brilliant myself. There are quite a few questions that have come in from you guys, so we'll start working through them, and I think Mike's going to be the one who has to answer them. So the first question is, what are your weighting factors and how were they devised? Is it a static or dynamic model?
We've used flat algorithms to have a look at different types of student engagement. There is an info button on the model which basically details what the criteria are. So it says there's a straight percentage of how many timetable sessions a student attended out of how many timetable sessions they were due to attend. On each of these, the VLE, it was a score about how many days they'd logged in, and on the library about how many times they'd engaged with the library. We chose, while we could have had a variable across all of our different courses, others that were very VLE dependent, we could have weighted that way, but it was felt that if we wanted a simple, clear message, then to use a single method and use our knowledge of the course to determine whether that was out of line with other students who were studying on that same course.
Great. Another question is assessment data taken from the VLE or SRS?
The assessment data, where does it come from? I would have to assume that it's in the student record system, but we already had a Qlikview model of that assessment data, and we've therefore taken the data that shows in the actual assessments and imported it straight into the model. But our assessment team have developed their own models around assessments, and we've linked that data together rather than created it fresh.
Okay. The next question is, there was a comment section on the student screen. Is this held in Qlik or in the student information system?
For this, it would be held in a separate database. So once we get the comments, and the comments hasn't yet been fully developed, but when we get it working, it will create its own database that the product will then link to. We don't currently have an overall student system where we monitor all the different engagements we have with the students. If we had, you could link them, but we don't.
Okay. Lots of questions coming in. Obviously, this is an interesting topic. Next question is, how did the software handle the amount of data? I'm guessing we are talking about tens of millions of records, especially the VLE.
One of the things, and I've been using Qlikview now for many years. The data handling is always something that's quite impressive about the product. Yes, it has a very huge amount of data in it, but the way the software uses it, you can see the speed at which I'm, when I was refreshing the different screens, selecting on things, it's almost instantaneous. So we had no problem in terms of using that data.
Okay. Another question coming in. How did you go about getting personal tutors on board and willing/keen to use the system?
It was getting people involved in the original working group, clearly having student representation and academic representation were key. So it was engaging with them. What we found is that, it built momentum. There was caution at the beginning, but as we rolled it out to individual departments, we found that people, once they started using, could see the benefit of the product. So I have not encountered any resistance. In actual fact, we've had a number of them who have come and given us very positive feedback about it.
Next question. Who drove the development of the dashboard and who was part of the working group?
From a senior perspective, it was something that I was keen on, so I've driven it from a senior level. The person who chairs the group and has had a very significant involvement with it is our Director of Student Services, but also we've got people whose job it is to support students. So we've got student success people who have also played a very key role. So yeah, a small team in our student services have done the day-to-day refining and development of it, strongly supported by our Director of Student Services. The overall design that since September has been largely driven by that group.
Next question. Do students have direct access to their own data in this format?
They will have. That's what we're currently developing. We have a student app where they can use the app to look at their timetable and the various other support mechanisms at Anglia Ruskin, and our intention is to build this into the app so they will be able to see their view.
Next question. Have there been any problems with the data quality? Have students challenged the accuracy of any of the data held about them, for example, attendance?
I have not got any examples where that has happened. However, I'm not close enough to the operational aspect. There is no doubt that with all systems, data quality is something that has to be monitored. If somebody's card fails to record them in a lecture, obviously it will mark them as absent because we have a tap-in system where they tap their card on a sensor. If they don't walk in and tap their card, obviously it won't record them. So to a certain extent, there is possibility for some minor issues. However, part of the dashboard process will pick that up. If a student identifies that their attendance isn't being recorded correctly, that would immediately make us look at their card and make sure that it was working properly.
Thank you, Mike. Next question. Is this being used to measure and manage the performance of academic staff?
No, is the simple answer. It is very much designed as a student support function. There are lots of mechanisms that we have in place to look at our academic staff performance. This wasn't ever designed to be a method of assessing them.
Okay. There are loads of questions, so I'm going to try and get through them as quickly as we can. When you introduced this to students, what did you tell them? How did you explain it to them?
We have a large strategy document which identifies what the purpose of student engagement is. As I said, this was developed with student union representation, who obviously had students at the heart of what they were looking at. I think it was very much in terms of the language. This is about supporting students to achieve their outcomes. So we're looking at, this isn't just about students who are possibly heading into a place where they would end up withdrawing. This is also looking at supporting students attain better results by pointing them to other resources they can access to help them on the journey.
Okay. What were the benefit impact expectations regarding this dashboard development that you are using to assess the success of this development?
The success is obviously going to be, eventually what you would expect is that we would see some improvements in our key data sets. Therefore, often these come out some years after this cohort. So we will see what, it's at the pilot stage at the moment. It goes for full launch in September 2017. So obviously we know which areas we're looking at, and we would be able to see if performance in those areas starts to improve. But it's very much something that you would see over time rather than an immediate impact, particularly seeing as it is a pilot. There are 26 pilots across the institution going on, so we do have a reasonable coverage.
The next question is, and possibly I can maybe even answer this, how long before students have access to this dashboard for their own profile? I'm especially interested in the time between this and the original launch date for staff.
We're developing it at the moment. You can comment because you've been closer to this bit than I have.
Yeah, so the way that students are going to have access to this is via, and somebody's already brought it up, Qlikview have something called imprinting, which is a very fast report distributor. So instead of students having access to Qlikview, which is always an option, we can run off 20,000 reports for students, which can be posted directly to their student portal. And I think the plan is every week the student gets a refreshed idea of their engagement, and that will have, it won't be a complicated screen. It will have some objects on there in terms of some charts which really how they are engaged, what their engagement score is effectively with the university. I'm just going to see if we've got any more questions.
We've got a question, are you the sponsor for this tool? If so, it's interesting that this is with you rather than the student engagement areas, so PVC, etc. I suppose one of the things, one of the reasons why I'm champion, first of all, is because I had a specific interest in this area. I had many discussions with the Director of Student Services about this, who's also very keen on this area. I was the original developer of Qlikview at Anglia Ruskin. So I had a knowledge about Qlikview, which I suppose has given me a specific interest in continuing to develop a range of tools for use at Anglia Ruskin.
Okay, we're almost at the end now, so we're probably going to draw a line under the sort of last remaining 2 questions or 3 questions. library management systems only provide data on the issue of books or perhaps access to databases, but students visit library to study also. Is that included in the library percentage, or is that under attendance?
Originally our library information was only based upon access to library, but of course that was flawed. This one still says it's about taps, but it's more complicated than that, because we are actually looking at whether students are accessing library resources in addition. But we have library access tap in, so students who enter any one of our libraries tap in, and we get data from that as well.
Okay, and I think this probably will be our last question, and I have the questions on the chat, and I will either myself or Mike will try and get back to you on the other questions. The last one is, how is attendance data collected? For example, registers / card swipes, etc.
It's all card swipes. So the system we introduced across our university a few years ago was to have sensors in every classroom, and students will tap their card on the sensor. That will record their attendance. That's mapped against our timetabling system to get a positive link, and that's how the system works. We don't hold paper registers in that way.
Okay. I think we will, it's now 40, we've gone 40 minutes into, so we're 5 minutes over time. I just want to thank you, Mike, for your time. The feedback on the chat has been very positive indeed. Anglia Ruskin University, I feel, are the cutting edge of this subject of student engagement. And this dashboard, as I said, I think is absolutely brilliant. So thank you everybody for attending. We shall try and get back to people on the questions we weren't answered, and this will also be posted up. This webinar, including the questions and answer session, will be posted on our website, and we'll send you the link to it. So thank you very much everyone, and thank you, Mike.
Yeah.